Hey, Harpslingers, welcome to the Harpslinger Podcast, where each and every week we're going to hang out with the greatest harmonica players in the music business. And if you're into harmonica, if you're into music at all, make sure you go down, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, ding the bell so we can let you know when new content is available. If you're watching this on the Honer Music Facebook page, there's a little share button down at the bottom of the thread. Make sure you push that. Share this to your homepage and share the love. We sure would appreciate it. All right, everybody. Hey, my next guest is a very, very special guy, and I'm incredibly excited to have him on the show. He's Grammy nominated, everybody. He's a New Jersey-based frontman, recording artist, vocalist, harmonica player extraordinaire. I'd say he's an absolute harpslinger. He's toured the globe with, the original Blues Brothers band and the reformed Blood, Sweat, and Tears. He also fronts a very popular group in the New Jersey, New York area called the Hudson River Rats, which we're going to talk about too. And without further ado, everybody, please make him welcome the one and only Mr. Rob Paparozzi. Hey, Rob, how you doing, man?
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, man, it's great to be here with you. It's so great. There we are. I'll put you on it. We'll settle up the screen here. So, we've got a lot to talk about today, but, you have led such an incredible career, and it started way back, and it looks like I was doing, of course, some background research on you. You started playing as early as like 1967, right? Is that about right?
That would be about right. Yeah, I was like around 10th grade, 9th, 10th grade in high school. Yeah.
Yeah. What were you in? Was it a band? What was your thing?
Yeah. I mean, I started out I had two older brothers, a younger brother and a sister, but my two older brothers were kind of into playing guitar, and they were getting into the guitar scene and starting a band. So they actually had a band. And I really was like excited, like, wow, that looks so cool. What can I do? But I can't play guitar. So they're already playing guitar. So I begged my parents to buy me a drum set. And I said, please, I know I'll be a great drummer. And we had 5 kids, and it was like a lot of money to go buy me a drum set.
Sure.
But they did. They bought me a drum set. I got like a Stuart, which is like a Japanese set. It's a Stuart Blue Sparkle. And man, I sucked. I couldn't play nothing on it.
That's amazing. You could have been, derailed right then, but you didn't. You had persistence.
I had persistence. I wanted to be cool, and be in a band. I knew I wanted to do something like that. So anyway, my parents said, look, if you're not going to play them, we really could use the money. So they sold the drums back. I gave up on the drums. So when my brothers went out, I would grab their guitars and I'd try and make sounds on the guitars.
Right.
And my oldest brother, Lou, he was like a hippie back. He was in college already, and he went to Woodstock, and he was in the Students for a Democratic Society. He'd go to rallies, and he used to go see Bob Dylan, and he had a harmonica laying on the shelf. Now, I knew they always got mad when I picked up they don't touch our guitars when we're not home, But I said, who's going to know if I play the harmonica? And I grabbed the harmonica, and there was this magical connection immediately with this little thing. I don't know how it happened, but it did.
Yeah, I hear that as I interview guys. They say I sort of, Jelly Roll Johnson in particular, he said, his dad, someone always ends up giving you, or it seems like there's an interesting way you come across a harmonica. And, yours was you just sort of lifted it from your brother. But, even I found my first harmonica laying in the backyard. I grew up in this old Victorian home in a small town in southern Illinois. We swear to this day that house is haunted. And one day I walked out, and this harmonica was lying in the backyard, and I picked it up and, beat out the dirt a little bit and started playing. And I always felt like that was some sort of a spiritual, magical sort of moment for me. But Jelly Roll said the same thing. His father had given him one, and as soon as he played it, there was this immediate connection. And I think the harmonica has that connection to guys,
It's fascinating hearing how you started, how everybody first got that connection. And because it's a pretty unorthodox instrument as instruments go, and so it's fun to hear how the connection happened. And it felt natural. I wasn't like playing great stuff on it. I was listening to some Beatles on the radio. That's what was on it. Some Bob Dylan, And my mother my mother owned a candy store. My father was a construction worker, but my mom wanted to get a business that she could watch these 5 kids and not have to go to an office every day. So she bought a candy store, and she was a good cook. So it was like a luncheonette. And we had a jukebox in the back room, which the teenagers loved. They would come in and buy a pack of cigarettes, and they'd go in the back and they'd play songs on the jukebox and sip their Cokes. And I thought that was so cool. But there was this guy, Harry Venezia, who was sort of like he was a greaser. He had a black leather jacket. And so he came in, bought the cigarettes, and was smoking and being cool. But he was artsy too. He had like a sketch pad. He could really draw. He was like so he was like a greaser artist, cool guy.
Yeah.
One day he walks into the candy store, and my 2 older brothers now are behind this counter because we're helping our mom, and he's going, "Hey guys," he goes, "I got something you guys might want to hear." And he goes, "Here." And it was the first Paul Butterfield record. I don't know where Harry got it from, but he had it because he was so cool. He was into great stuff, and he's going, "Check this out." He goes, "Give it back to me in a couple of weeks." All 3 of us put it on our little vinyl turntable. It was like, what is that? And that was my ears opening up now to electric harmonica. It didn't even sound like a harmonica. It sounded like a sax or something.
Yeah.
And we never gave him the record back. We said, "You can't have it back."
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. That's a great story. So, so your first influence was besides John Lennon and Bob Dylan was the guy. He's been like everyone's sort of kind of go to, for electric blues harmonica, the first experience.
Yeah, because I'm from New Jersey. I'm this like white kid from New Jersey. I didn't even know what Chicago blues was.
Right.
And when I heard the Butterfield thing, then I started doing some research, and I saw, well, it came from Chicago and all these people he learned from. And it was like a thing that was a genre, and so I said, I didn't know. Yeah, so I went to the library. They didn't have so much, but they did have Sonny Terry and Roy Williamson 1 and 2, and I started taking those records out, and the interest started. It was the bug had bitten.
Right. So you were literally taking the needle and moving it back and forth and trying to figure out these parts. Yeah. I mean, that was difficult, right? Back in the day. I mean, my experience was more with CDs, but it was the same thing. You'd hear a lick and reverse, hear a lick, reverse, and just hear it I would sit in my bedroom and just try to figure out how to play these licks for hours and hours and hours. It's amazing now that, up and comers, anybody can really get onto YouTube or call you up and, do a lesson over the internet and get it straight from the horse's mouth. It's got to be much easier nowadays than it was before.
Yeah, there's so many. And when I started in the 60s, obviously we didn't have these tools the great tools that I think are great for players coming up. But like you had said, the first thing we did is let's find out what key harmonica I'm supposed to use for this song. What is he, what could even if there was no harmonica on it, what key are they in? So you'd spend time, and then you take a pen and you maybe write on the record right next to the name of each song that you're going to use a C harp or a D harp, right?
Yeah. So did you figure out on your own that you needed to use the circle of fifths and count up 4 or back 5 and to play a cross harp, or were you playing?
I had no training. I didn't know what a circle of fifths was. I didn't know anything about music because
you were playing drums until that point.
I was playing drums. I didn't want to study. I used to laugh at my friend in school because he would be carrying home a saxophone every day and say, "What are you playing in a school band for, man?" Like, what an idiot. I should have been like knuckling down at that point. Yeah. And here I am just messing around in my mom's candy store, so I didn't know anything about music. So yeah, it was all seat of my pants kind of thing. Learning from the guitar, though, I would wait till my brothers left and I'd say, this looks like what he was doing. Maybe that's figure out, maybe that's a G chord. Okay. So I taught myself like through the guitar about chords but I didn't know much theory or anything like that. So it was all that one book, that a lot of harp players grabbed. Tony Glover's book was the only book. We didn't have Harmonica for Dummies back then,
Yeah.
So we went and bought this book, and he's mentioning positions. Okay, let's make note of that. There's something called positions. Now I got to find out where that is on these records that I'm listening to.
Yeah,
it became a process. but for about, I was what? So for maybe I'm 15 or 16 years old. And now I'm playing in a blues band that we started in the suburbs of New Jersey.
Right.
And I do about 30 blues songs. And I became the singer because nobody else wanted to sing. Well, who's going to sing? Well, I don't know. Let's take a turn trying to sing a song. Rob sounds pretty good. All right, he'll be the singer.
Great. And that was it for you. That was the beginning of it for you.
Yeah, so I became the singer, and I figured, well, maybe harmonica would go really good with the singing thing because, I got to do something when I'm not singing, kind of a thing. So the harmonica became a pretty good, match.
Right on. Yeah, I can relate to that. I started as a singer singing in the church choir, right? And in the grade school choir in school. And then when I found that harmonica, until then, Rob, I'd been playing a kazoo. I was sitting in my neighbor's tree all day playing songs I'd heard on the radio on the kazoo. And then when I found this harmonica, it sort of opened up a whole other world for me. But so you sort of found your voice both as a vocalist and as a harp player around the same time, 15, 16 years old. Sounds great.
Yeah, it was around that time, and like I said, we were at first it was more pop oriented before I learned about the blues. So we were singing songs from the Beatles or Moby Grape, these rock bands that were, Cream. And I saw Cream at a local Catholic high school down the street from me in 1968 with Eric Clapton, because that was the scene. It was like a rock scene.
Right.
And my brothers were into it too. So I would go and see the Who at a local college. And so I was very much into that kind of music at the time.
Great music, by the way. Great era for music. I mean, that still inspires me. And when I listen to music, it seems like I'm always going backward. I'm not listening to too much today, which I'm not sure is. Maybe I should listen to more music today. But I'm so inspired by the older stuff.
And then
you've worked.
The band started breaking up, and then it became like, okay, what do we do now? I know 30 blues songs, and that's it.
Right.
It's like, right.
Right, exactly. So when did you start decide you played diatonic, I guess, for a long time, and then at some point you decided I want to play chromatic. What was the precipitous there?
Yeah, that's an interesting story because I was still living home, and I was kind of going to college. I didn't want to go to college, but if I didn't go to college, I was going to get drafted and go to Vietnam, and so I was in like President Nixon's last graduating class to get a student deferment. So my mother said, you better knuckle down, man. You better get serious about something because otherwise you're just going to get drafted. So I said, all right, so I was going to school and I'm kind of trying to figure it out. And she said she was reading the New York Times one day, and she loved the crossword puzzles in there, but she's reading it. She's
puzzle, right? It's the best one.
Yeah. And so she said, Rob, are you serious about playing harmonica? I said, oh yeah, I mean, I'm getting really good. I can play anything. And she's going, oh really? She goes, did you ever hear of Larry Adler? And I said, Larry Adler? No, he probably not that good. I never heard of him, Yeah. And she said, sit down.
Yeah.
I sat down and she's reading me this article. Larry Adler was an artist from the 40s and the 50s. He was blackballed from working because of this McCarthyism thing going on in the 50s, and she told me the whole story about that. And he couldn't get a gig after that. He couldn't get a job. He was working in movies. He was friends with George Gershwin. I said, well, what does that mean? She said, well, he's a harmonica player, and he's coming back this week for the first time in 50 years to New York City to do a show at the Rainbow Grill over in New York City, because we're right across the river, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to be tomorrow night with his old friend Henny Youngman. And if you get there at 5 o'clock, there's going to be a meet and greet, and you could shake his hand, and then you could come back and go to the show later. So if you're really serious about harmonica, why don't you go see Larry Adler? This is my mother.
That's great.
I'm like 17 or 18 years old. And I said, oh, all right, maybe I'll do that. I'll get on a train tomorrow and I'll go. And I went, and it was life-changing. When I heard Larry Adler play the chromatic, I said, boy, look how much I don't know about this instrument. I know one thing, and it was impressive to me. So I went out and I bought a harmonica.
Nice. A chromatic harmonica, right. So you've been playing, it sounds like you've been playing chromatic for a long time. When I hear you play, it's It's otherworldly, man. I mean, you're the guy. You're the go-to guy, it seems. I mean, for instance, let me tell you a quick little story. I was on tour with my band High South in Germany last year. I guess it was early this year, and we were opening for Roger Hodgson, who was the lead singer and wrote most of those great songs for Supertramp. And
yeah.
you know, when I was a kid, when I was a little kid, Breakfast in America had come out, and I remember listening to that harmonica part on the long way home, right? And I'm thinking, oh, you know, it's not terribly difficult. And so I learned how to play it, and I just thought that was so cool. And here I was opening for this guy, and I'm thinking, who's going to be playing the harmonica? Well, they had a great utility guy playing keys, playing acoustic guitar, a little chromatic, and playing diatonic. So after the show, I was hanging out with him and asking him, man, you know, I play diatonic, but I don't play chromatic. You sound great. How'd you learn? And he goes, do you know a guy named Rob Paparozzi? I said, yeah, well, I know of Rob Paparozzi. Yeah. He's like that. Well, that's who's teaching me how to play. And he sounded great, man. You did a great job with him.
Thank you. His name is Michael Keegan. And he lives down at the Jersey Shore. Amazing musician, right? I mean, he played keyboard, sang, and saxophone, and harmonica too. Yeah.
Yeah, that whole band was amazing, and Roger was singing in all those original keys. It was really impressive. But so you know, you've worked with the cream of the crop in the music business. Everybody from Bruce Springsteen to B.B. King, Dr. John, Whitney Houston, on and on and on. The Culture Club. Even was that you, by the way, on the Culture Club recordings.
Well, I was on one of the recordings, but it was later. I'm not on the original Karma Chameleon. They got back together around the turn of the century, and they, obviously everybody heard of, they had a lot of drug problems and stuff, and they got through all that, and they got back together around maybe the late 90s, and they were doing something for VH1 MTV stuff, and they were doing a comeback tour, and Phil Ramone was producing it, and they needed harmonica for those hits, the Church of the Poison Mind and Karma Chameleon. And that's when I had gotten a call. So I got to meet them. They're wonderful guys. And it was a pleasure working with them. And we did a couple of live things. And that turned into a record, a live recording. So I'm not on the original, but it was fun learning that stuff.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, all of these great musicians that you've worked with and recorded with, at what point would you say in your career and how? Because I know that when people are listening, I was always wondering and asking guys for advice about how do you get into the music business, first of all, I've come to know that we all have our own different path. There's a different path for everybody, but I think there's some basic things that we can share with other people about, how we got to, the opportunities that we came to. What were the turns, the nooks and crannies the roads and avenues that you pursued that got you into the positions to be heard by these sorts of people and be able to work with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a big part of it for me, being a young man from New Jersey and being a half-hour train ride from New York City or a car drive, I think that had a lot to do. I think I was lucky to be in that proximity, because, like I had mentioned before, when the bands broke up, and I realized after talking with my mom that I wanted to do something with this harmonica and maybe definitely go beyond blues and what blues harp that I was learning, and work in chromatic and just play music. I seemed to at that point started to just love music and could do it. And maybe I figured as a harmonica player, I wouldn't have to compete with all these great guitar players and singers and drummers and keyboard players, because I didn't have the chops for any of that. And so I think being in New York kind of kicked me into it. So my brother was studying guitar a little more serious, and he was studying over in New York City with this guy, Alan Hanlon, who played 7-string guitar. He played jazz. He had a studio with Sal Salvador and Barry Gilbreth, these real legit New York guitar players. And they were above the Ed Sullivan Theater. They had like an office space. And I went with my brother one day because I wanted, see New York and come in. And I sat there and I watched him. And he introduced me to Alan, his teacher. And that was that. Well, as I'm in college now, I'm getting really bored in college. I'm not a great student here. And I said, I gotta get better on this harmonica. I got to learn how to read music or something, and I started playing a little more chromatic. So I put together a little cassette tape of me playing as many different styles as I could.
Right.
And what I did was I went into New York and I went up to Alan Hanlon's studio, who I said, "You're not going to remember me. I'm Mario's brother," and he's going like, "Yeah, I remember you, kid," and he goes, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I made up this little demo reel of harmonica. I know you've been doing stuff here in New York." And I said, what would I have to do to try and maybe get some work beyond just playing in bands, like playing harmonica on sessions? Yeah. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Well, I'll tell you what." He goes, so I said, "You want me to put the tape on?" He goes, "Yeah, you can put it on." He listens to like 20 seconds. He goes, yeah, you're good. You can play. He picks up a phone and he calls his friend who owns a jingle house in New York. It's a big giant, and I don't know what a jingle house is. And he's going, "Yeah, Jack, it's guy Jack Zimmerman." He goes, "Me and Jack used to do the Howdy Doody show together. That's how far we go back." And I'm going like, "Okay." And he's going, "Oh, yeah, I got this kid here, Rob Paparozzi. Oh, Toots Steelman? Oh, he can play circles around Toots." And I'm going, "No." Yeah, I said, "Please don't," and because I already had figured out who Toots Steelman was at that point.
Yeah.
And he's going, all right, I'll send him right over. And I'm going like, oh my God, I'm in deep now. Like, yeah. I really jumped in this. And I went over and I met the guy and he's going, yeah, he goes, "You sound really good." He listened to the tape, He goes, "We don't get that much call for harmonica though. I'll tell you that, be honest with you, we've worked with Toots Steelman and a couple of guys like that over here." He goes, "But you know what? If we ever need something, we'll give you a call. Thanks for coming in, kid." And that was it.
Right.
Didn't hear anything. 3 months later, get a phone call. "Come on in and play on this. We got a yogurt commercial." And I grabbed all my harps. I went in and I was nervous as heck. And I went in. And so it's like doing those kind of connections.
Uh-huh. It leads to the next thing, doesn't it?
If you can do a good job, and I got through it somehow, I did it. And it's word of mouth. You had asked me, what does it take? It really takes word of mouth and doing a good job for a producer. And I'm sure you've been there with a lot of this stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Leads to another gig.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is. I mean, and I'd go home and I'd write this guy's name down, put it in my little black book and see if I got another call. And that's really was word of mouth. A lot of pounding the pavement.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. When I was in New York, I spoke with Adam Gusso about this very thing. I would grab the Village Voice and I would hop on the 1 and the 9 because I lived on the Upper West Side, and I'd head downtown and I would go to, I had a list of some clubs that I wanted to go to that night that I thought I might have a chance of getting on stage with somebody and playing. And that's what I did. I would go in and I would just ask to sit in, and it wasn't even really blues jams. It was a lot of songwriters and some bands and things like that. And it just sort of led to another. So I think, the answer is sort of like tenacity, I guess, right? Just getting yourself out there and
you got to have that chutzpah, we used to call it, right? Chutzpah. And just do it. And if you're in New York City, you don't know who's out there listening that particular night and might remember your name and call you for something. And that's really what it was. And I was real hesitant about going to New York because I don't want to go to New York, get a ticket and my car will get towed. As I got some gigs here in Jersey. I don't need to go to New York. And I get a phone call one day from this guy, from John and Steve Conti. And I think you know these guys.
Yes, absolutely.
They're two brothers that were from Jersey.
Uh-huh.
And I knew them I knew their mom, I used to have a wedding band that I played. I taught myself enough piano that I could play. And so we had a wedding band and their mom was a great jazz singer.
Yes.
And we used to go out and do wedding gigs. And she told me she had two sons that were really getting good on the guitar. And I know you have a band, Rob, and maybe you could use these guys sometime. Well, they called me up and said, "We are in music school. We're now playing with blood, sweat, and tears. We're doing music for a living now, and we know you like playing blues. And you know what? When we get off the road, we love playing blues. We don't, we're sick of the blood, sweat, and tears songbook. We just want to play some blues. And we're in New York, and we have some friends in New York City that we'd like to go play for." And I'm going like, I don't know about New York. Well, come on, let's do some Wednesday nights. We got this guy, Jeff Kent, who does jingles and producing, and he'll put it together for us. What you got to do is show up. I said, all right, I'll do 2 of them,
Right.
And we went over there, and the deal was we had to play blues. They wanted a blues band. So I said, what are we going to call this thing? So, well, we're living in an apartment in Weequahic, right on the Hudson River. Let's call it the Hudson River Rats.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a dumb name for a blues band, but if that's what you guys want to call it, it's fine with me. Yeah. I'm only doing 2 of these gigs,
Right. And you stuck with it for quite a while, yeah?
And it turned into a scene where, Carole King and Cyndi Lauper and David Clayton Thomas and Blue Marini and Buster Poindexter. And one night I'm waiting, it's like it was a scene because all these people in New York, Phoebe Snow, they heard there was a place where you can go play some blues. Now, this was in the early 80s, like mid 80s, and there wasn't much blues going on in New York City. And there's a blues band, and they're going to play a set. But if you want to get up, you got to go up to this guy, Jeff Kent, and we don't care who you are. You got to put your name on this list. So it was like a bona fide jam.
Yeah.
It didn't matter if you were some hip cat, you got to put your name on this list. And if you come up and play with this band, and they're a good blues band, you got to play a blues. You just can't pick a song that you want to do. It's got to be a blues.
Yeah, I love it. That's fantastic. Well,
I went on the line to go to the bathroom one night, and this guy with a British accent, he goes, I want to play a blues with you guys. You guys, and it was Julian Lennon. It was John Lennon's son. He's going, I want to play a blues. Is Johnny B. good at blues? And I'm going like, well, yeah, and you're John Lennon's son, so you have to come up and play with us,
Absolutely. Wow.
And I didn't know it was going to be a scene like that. And it turned into be a thing where people started calling me saying, I have a jingle I want you to sing and play harmonica on. I'm going, I don't really know how to do that, and they said, well, don't worry. We saw you down at that club last week. You just come in and we'll tell you what to do.
Yeah.
And it became like, wow, okay.
Right. Absolutely. So, you ended up doing a ton of jingles. You did, you've played with, some of the bands we've mentioned, and some of these amazing stars, that we mentioned. But you also have done Broadway, right?
And Broadway was a thing. I mean, if you lived in New York or near New York, Broadway was the Great White Way, and it was there forever. And I know much about the Broadway scene, and I often wonder. I wonder if they ever use harmonica on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
And I went over there one day, and me and my wife, we were just dating at the time, and we said, let's go to a show. And we saw this show called Shenandoah. And maybe the 70s, it was like the 70s. I was finished with college. And on Wednesdays you could go to a matinee cheap, like half price.
Sure.
So bought some tickets. Let's go see the show Shenandoah. It looks like it's about the Civil War or something, And we're sitting there, and I'm hearing harmonica. I said, "Whoa, I wonder. It must be a." And I opened up the playbill, and sure enough, it said harmonica, Mike chimes. And it had about 20 other musicians listed, but you couldn't see the orchestra. They were down in some pit.
In the pit, right, yeah.
And I was impressed. I said, well, okay, maybe that's a possibility, but I didn't think much about it. And then fast forward now to the early 80s, before I started going over to New York to do the Under, that was called Under Acme, that blues scene with John and
I remember that club. Yeah.
It was a cool little club. So before that, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who played banjo and guitar, and he said, hey, Rob, he goes, I just got a call to go, and I auditioned for a show. I don't think I got it, but, I don't think I did that great on what I was playing, but I spent most of my audition telling them about you because they needed a harmonica player for this new show coming in, written by Roger Miller, called Big River. And I'm going like, wow, really? Now, at the time, I was studying with Robert Bonfiglio, who was a classical. I wanted to really learn, and I was getting my reading stuff together. And I think Robert had told me about a show he had auditioned for. And I was wondering if that was the same show, but who knows? I didn't know much about the New York scene. So he said, so you might get a phone call. Never got a phone call. Well, 3 weeks later, my phone rings, and we're doing a thing for a show. Would you come on in with your harmonicas? We'd like to audition you for this show, a Broadway show. And apparently that was the show. It was for Big River. And I went in and I had a tackle box of harmonicas because we didn't have corner cases at the time, right? I had this ugly tackle box, and I put all my harps in it, some chromatics and jaw harps and whatever, you know. And I went in there, and it was a cold January night, and I find the address, and I go up to this penthouse, and I walk in, and there's these people there. There was the people producing the show and the conductor, and they said, look, we've been auditioning harmonica players for about a month now. We're going to be honest with you. And part of the show, you're going to have to be on stage and in the pit. So do you read music? And I said, well, kind of, not really well, but it doesn't matter. It's not that kind of a show. We're more interested in your musicality and what you can offer. What's all those harmonicas in your case there? And they're looking at the case, and what's that big one? What's the little? And I take them out and I play a little bit. Yeah. And I go, all right. And they're getting ready to pull out a piece of music and put it in front of me. I'm going like, oh boy, it's going to be over now, you know? And they're going, well, you know what? You said that you played a little guitar, a little piano. And I said, well, I fool around with it. Well, sit down at that piano over there. Play us a song. You sing? Go ahead, sing something. So now, like, they were just
seeing what you got.
I do. I just sat down and I played a Leon Russell song called Sweet Emily. It was like just like a bluesy little thing that I had taught myself. And they said, okay, well, look, thanks for coming in. You sound great. You're wonderful. But we'll be in touch. We'll let you know what happens, you know. And that was it. Never heard from anybody for about a month. And the phone rings and I get a call. And they said, we would like you to do this show. It's called Big River. And, you know, you got the gig. Now, I was studying with Robert. I had just started a day gig because I needed money. My wife, we just had a baby. I bought a house. I had a mortgage, you know. It was like getting crazy because I couldn't find it. Nobody was calling me to play on sessions, you know.
Right.
So they said, well, you got the gig and you start next week. And I said, well, it's Broadway show. So it's at night, right? They go, well, yeah, but you got to come in during the day because you're going to be on stage. And it's going to be 9 to 4. First month is going to be 9 to 5. And I said, well, I just started this 9 to 5 gig. So I have to say no, you know. And they said, what do you mean? This is a Broadway show. It is a great opportunity for you. Come and play your harmonica. And I said, it sounds really good. I said, I think I'm going to pass, you know, and I did. I said, but thank you for thinking of me, and I'm glad you liked it, and that was it. And I never heard back from them again. And the show opened up. And they won 7 Tony Awards. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching the Tony Awards. I'm going, that's the show that I was supposed to do. Like, what did I do? You know,
right.
Got a hit show, you know. So anyway, I said, well, all right, you know, easy come, easy go. And I continued to do my thing. I was still playing. I never stopped playing, but I was juggling like 3 or 4 gigs to wedding band, and I had a day gig. I was trying to, you know, make some money so I can, you know, support my family. Yeah. And sure enough, my phone rang the week after the Emmys, the
Tonys.
Those things.
Tony Awards, I think.
Tony Awards. So a week after the Tony Awards, I get a phone call from this guy, Donnie Brooks.
Yeah. Okay.
And Donnie, he says, I'm a harmonica player. We never met. I know you play harmonica. I was told about you from the producers of the show. I'm doing Big River. I just finished all rehearsals. We opened. It's a hit show. He goes, and I need a sub. I can't be down there doing 8 shows a week.
Right.
He goes, and they really liked you a lot. Would you consider coming in to sub for me? I said, is it at night? Because I was still working the day gig, right? And he said, well, don't worry about the matinees. I can do the matinees. He goes, yeah. He goes, come on in and sit next to me and see what you think of this show. And I would love you to sub for me. So I went in. And I learned the whole show, and there was some costume changes. There was a lot of playing in the pit, some of it on stage. And I ended up doing hundreds of shows for Donnie because we hit it off. Donnie was a great musician, just a great harmonica player. And he was Mickey Raphael's inspiration, Don Brooks, a great country player who from Texas that started out with Jerry Jeff Walker and Waylon Jennings, and then found his way to New York City. And became the guy, you know?
Wow, that's amazing. What an amazing journey and what an amazing story. I mean, so I'm a fan of Broadway. I love Broadway. My wife did a number of Broadway shows, Phantom of the Opera, and
Wow.
many others. And so we're fans of that music. But as a youngster coming up, when I was singing in school and in college, Big River was one of my absolute favorite musicals, and I would always try to sneak the harmonica in. I would be singing as a singer. It was more like a review situation, but I'd always be like to the director, hey, I play some harmonica. I can play this, look out for me, muddy water, all this whole thing, and so I always got to sneak in the harmonica there. So yeah, I love that. I love that musical. That's a great story. Any other Broadway did you?
Oh, yeah. So that was Big River, and it's funny. So now that show closed around '87, and I ended up doing it a lot. And then I finally got up the nerve to quit my gig, and start playing more music. And around 1989, there was a new show coming in called the Will Rogers Follies with Keith Carradine, and then later on Mac Davis came up and did it, and Larry Gatlin did it. And they said, we need a harmonica. I said, a harmonica with a 26-piece band? They said, yeah, well, Will Rogers played a little harmonica, so we're going to work that in to the show. And I ended up doing the Will Rogers Follies. I ran about 2.5 years, and we won some Tony Awards. So I finally got in a show that won some awards, and
Yeah.
did that. And then all of a sudden, now the sessions really started going crazy in the 90s.
Okay.
Some Cyndi Lauper and Whitney Houston's people, and anybody that came into town. I mean, I wasn't the only guy. We had Robert Bonfiglio, an amazing chromatic player,
Yep.
William Gambison. Later on, Hendrik Merkins came into town for chromatic. So there was other guys playing, and Toots was still around, and Alan Blackie Schechter. But I became like the guy that can kind of do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, utility guy.
Yeah. Right.
And I would get a lot of calls. I didn't get all the calls, but it was enough to keep me busy.
Mhm.
And I would go in, and some days they wanted chromatic, some days they'd put a piece of music in front of me, some days they wanted just blues harp. So it became a gig.
That's fantastic. I love it. I love it. That's a great story, man. Will Rogers Follies, by the way, is another one of my absolute favorites. I mean, so you mentioned all these sessions that came around for you. I always ask guys what their sort of, when they go in for a session, a recording session, what's their sort of strategy? I know the situations are always different depending on the producer that you're working with, but is there any pearls of wisdom that you could share with the guys that are listening, guys and gals that are listening who maybe have not had much studio session work? I know I had a few pitfalls when I came to Nashville that I was like, I didn't know how to read a number chart, but I lied and said that I did, and then took it home with me and figured it out, But do you have any? Do you bring in like bunches of amps? Do you bring in different mic combos to work with different amps? So what's your approach?
Well, that the situation you were in, where you had a wide, so you didn't lose the gig.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bad approach. You don't want to ever turn down gigs. One of my friends, this guy Jeff Kent, said, "Rob, never tell him you can't do something. Just go in, and if you fall on your face, you'll do better on the next one." Okay, so that's a good approach, but try and be prepared. I realized that if I was going to really throw myself into this thing, I better get more proficient with the reading. So I worked on things. I wasn't like a great reader, but if somebody put a chart in front of me, I could read it. And I got better as I did it. Probably the most important piece of advice I can give you is, be prepared, get as many harmonicas as you can and know what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And for session work, I mean, if you say, I want to be a bluegrass player or a blues player, then you do what you have to do and you zero in on that. But if you want to be a session guy, you gotta move outside the box a little bit, and you gotta be ready for anything. So get a lot of harmonicas, and it's your attitude.
Mm-hmm.
They want, right? A producer is hiring musicians, and they're going into a studio, and they want their day to be fun.
Yeah, that's right.
Enough work already working for some executive that they got to produce and have this track ready by 5 o'clock. Don't go in with an attitude. Be positive. They want to get the job done. they also don't care that you played with this guy and you played with that. They just want to get the job done. Can you get it done? Can you get it done within an hour? Because we're hiring you for an hour. We'll pay you a little more if you have to go over, but can you get the job done? And I think that's a big part of it. Being able to work with a producer personality wise and get the job done. So everybody walks out of there happy, and it's not about you. It's about the artist. It's about the product, whatever it is. And that's my biggest piece of advice. Lose the attitude and get the job done.
Right on. That's great advice. That's actually excellent advice. And to the gear heads out there, are you bringing in a lot of different gear for options, or do you kind of know what they're looking for before you go in, or do you use what's in the studio? I've done that myself.
Yeah. If you're going to somebody else's session, unless they said, Rob, this is a straight ahead blues thing, bring your own bullet mic and we'll have an amp for you, that kind of a thing. But if they're not doing that, you're going to probably a pretty high-end studio where they're going to have great equipment and outboard gear and all kinds of stuff. So just go in and learn about what mics record better for harmonica, because you might say, hey, for this, you might want to set up an 87 Newman for me or something, depending on what they're looking for. So in a studio, I don't bring anything. At home now that we're doing home studios, I've been using this really cheap little box called the Joyo American, and it's a little Japanese made or Chinese made pedal. Okay. And I'll send you the link on it, and so you can do it. And basically, it's like an amp simulator. So if I don't want to go setting up a whole Fender amp, and if you use a pedal like this, then you don't even need. You could use like an Audix. I helped Audix design this mic years back.
Okay. Fireball, yeah.
And the Fireball going through a little pedal like this, you could get amped sounds, you get whatever you want, and it's a clean mic, but you can get the dirt just by putting a little drive on your pedal. Nice. And a lot of people have said, "Wow, I love your amp sound. What kind of amp was that?" So I'm giving my secrets away here, but you don't need to be setting up all kinds of stuff and lugging equipment around. If you're going to do a studio thing, you could probably get what you need from that. I love the Ultimate 58, right? Newman's blows me away. Yep. It's a 58 mic that's chopped off. It has a little volume control on it, records, and great for live gigs. Both of these are also great for live gigs as well. The volume pot I'm in love with on the Audix because it's very discreet, and you put it on about a quarter, so you do the sound check, right? And the sound guy got his thing, and you got headroom for when those guitar players.
Rob, that is a huge tip, and I can't believe no one's ever actually mentioned that, but I learned that fairly early that, okay, I'd give me all you got, they'd say, and I'd give them all I've got and play, and then the gig would start and the guitar players would start turning up, and I had nowhere to go. I had no headroom. So I cheat every time. So the guys that know me go, okay, now I know what you just did. Now really show me what you've got there.
That's it. I'm maxed out, man.
Yeah, that's it. I'm maxed out. Absolutely. Well, hey, I have been just cooking and jamming around the house to your album, and I want to make sure I pronounce it correctly. But you correct me if I'm wrong. Etruscan Soul.
Etruscan Soul, yes, and you did a great job pronouncing it. Etruscans were before the Romans, and they were a very artsy bunch from Italy before the Romans took over. So I ended up calling my father was from Italy, and I ended up calling the record Etruscan Soul as a tribute to my dad.
Well, all right, fantastic. Well, it has a lot of soul in it. It's an eclectic album, and you've made all of these songs that sort of come together in this beautiful way. And I want to say that the arrangements and the guest vocalists that you have and the horn, everything about this record is just really top notch. And above all of that, I want to say, as a vocalist, when I listen to you sing, I just moved by your delivery. I mean, you have this ability to sort of, people have said this about Frank Sinatra. He's my favorite singer of all time, but that he inhabited a lyric. And I feel that way when I listen to you sing. You're telling a story, and I think that's something that a lot of singers with great chops maybe never realize how important that is. But boy, you have that in spades. And so from a harmonica player's perspective, a guy who loves to listen and play harmonica, I'm blown away by this record. And then as a vocalist, I get to listen to you when you're done blowing, listen to your vocal chops, and it's special, man. It's really special.
Thank you for noticing that. And I kind of tried to bring a lot of that into my harmonica playing too, as I learned, and I started playing chromatic too, even, and blues harp. Listen to the words, listen to the melody, and trying the phrasing that we do as singers, right? And we try and perfect that. If you could do some of that bring some of that into your harmonica player, it's going to make you a better harp player too, you know?
That's right, man. It's very lyrical, isn't it? It's very much, the harp is very much like a voice. It reminds me of a slide guitar a little bit, because it can move between the notes, and it's got so much emotion. I was curious. I know I sort of in the email that I sent you before when we were sort of planning this session, I was hoping that maybe you would play and sing a little bit of something for us, and then I'm not going to let you go. Even still, I definitely want to see if you would give us a lick of the week at the end of the session. But it's up to you if you want to do both or one or the other. It doesn't matter. I'm just happy you're here.
I'll put something up and we'll play a little, because we're getting towards the end here. Yeah. I did want to give a plug, because we both play Hohner harmonicas, right?
Right. That's right.
There's a lot of great harmonicas out there, but I play the Big River, and what I did is I kind of worked with Tom Halchek from Bluemoon, and we took a Hohner Big River, and he knew what I liked in a harmonica. He knew I was an older player, so I started in the 60s. And we kind of put his combs on it. We kind of fancied up the cover plates and nickel plated them and anodized the comb a little bit with brass. And I came up with a custom Big River, which was kind of Big Rivers had. It's just an okay harp. It's not for professional harp players. But we turned this thing into a Cadillac. So that's my plug for the Hohner Big Rivers.
Can guys pick these up on your website?
Yeah, I'll send you a link to it. It's not on Hohner's website. It's a Hohner Big River that we customized through Bluemoon harmonicas. So it'll take you right to his site, and you could pick. There's not a whole lot of them left, because it was a limited run, but they're really good harps.
Yeah, right on, man. Well, let's hear it by all means.
All right, cool. Let me put on a little track here.
Okay.
And see if I can blow a little bit and play a little bit. I don't know.
But thank you, Rob. Thank you so much for spending time with us here on the Harpslinger Podcast today. You're so many people in this industry look to you as, because you're such a warm guy. You're such a great individual, and you are just at the peak of vocals and harmonica. It's just, you're an inspiration to me, man. So thanks
for having me, and good luck with the show, man. And your band, I know you're going to get back out into work eventually. So I'll try and when you get up to the New York parts, I'll be there, man. You gotta get me.
I will let you know. Absolutely. Maybe we can get you up on stage to play a little bit. That would be a coup. That'd be fantastic. All right. Peace and love to you, Rob. Thank you so much. And we'll do this again sometime, I hope. Okay.
I would love to. Thanks for having me, Jamie.
You got it, brother. Take care.